about love and friends and family.
It's all about sharing a feast and cheers.
It's always been happy cause the children are dear.
It's all about peace every time of the year.
If only I could see your face again, not behind the screen at the other end. If only we could party, kick back your boots, just let me.
Wishing Christmas time, we be together.
It's all about the family. It's all about TNC. What? It's all about the family. Don't fret, don't sweat. You know what it is, cause you know and I know we'll be together
We'll
again.
go together to be together. It's Christmas time once again, and you know how we'll begin. Spread love and receive blessings from above.
If only I could see your face again, not behind the screen at the other end. If only we could party, kick back your boots, just let me.
Wishing Christmas time we'd be together again.
Wishing Christmas time we'll be together again.
The new channel. The new channel. Hashtag TNC Now.
The views, opinions, and insights expressed in the following shows are those of the host, producers, guests, and viewers. They do not necessarily reflect the position of the channel. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to the new channel. Our passion transforms, a community channel that sees all things new. My name is Jennifer Nuya, live streaming from Cavite, Philippines, and you're watching Stories from the Fringe. It's 3 days before that most awaited holiday of the year, Christmas. How time flies. Welcome once again to Stories from the Fringe. For those who are tuning in for the first time, Stories from the Fringe aims to push for more diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in all aspects of our lives. We are committed to creating a world where individual differences like gender, class, ability, among others, are not only understood but also celebrated and accepted. We can all be a part of this collective vision. In order to make the most of our time together, we encourage you to turn off all distractions, prepare to take notes, mental win, and just allow yourself to be fully focused and engaged with our guest today. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome to the show Erich Kurschat from Chicago. Erich, thank you for joining us today.
For having me. I'm so excited to be here.
My pleasure. Now, Eric, can you please tell our viewers a brief background about yourself and the work that you do?
Of course, I don't want to bore anybody, but I am a huge DISC nerd. That's what I start out with. DISC is a personality assessment I know that we're going to get into. But I haven't been doing DISC forever. I have been using it for 16 years, but I was a corporate HR professional outside of college. Moved to Chicago and got into human resources and spent quite a while doing that. And for the past 7 or so years, I have had my own business, Harmony Insights, helping organizations and consultants leverage the DISC personality assessment. I'm also the founder of the HRHotSeat inclusive mastermind community. I started that about 6 years ago as a way to bring HR professionals together to connect meaningfully and network meaningfully with one another in ways that are comfortable and fruitful and enjoyable instead of transactional and superficial like so much networking can be.
Mhm. Can you please tell more for our viewers' appreciation about this personality assessment and how is it usually used for?
Of course. So I was a psychology major in school. And so when I first learned about DISC in my corporate HR role, I got really excited. The hard part for me, and I'll be honest with you right up front, is that I am an introvert. And so when my boss came to me and said, Eric, we would love for you to begin teaching DISC to groups of up to 70 people at a time, I almost crawled under my desk.
I imagine.
I was really excited about DISC, but I was not at all excited about getting in front of 70 people. Well, we can talk about that journey for sure, but DISC is a very popular, one of the most popular personality assessments that organizations are using to help teams connect more effectively with one another and their stakeholders. It is one of the more popular ones out there. There are other popular assessments like Myers-Briggs, Strengths Finder, which is now called Clifton Strengths, I believe. You have Predictive Index and a couple of others. And DISC is one of the more popular selections for once somebody has been hired into an organization, helping them better understand their own strengths, but then certainly connect more effectively and more meaningfully with their teammates, really understand other people and embrace and celebrate diversity and inclusion instead of looking at those differences and seeing them as bad or detrimental in some way.
All right. So what are the different DISC personalities?
So it's a pretty accessible, I would say, a pretty accessible and simple model. Some of the models out there are a little bit harder to wrap your head around. It takes some time to really dig in. But with DISC, you have 4 primary. And I should say, I always come with disclaimers, Jennifer. I always have a disclaimer. And my disclaimer here is that we're so much more than our DISC style. So when I start talking about, these different styles, I don't want anyone to believe that it's easy to reduce anybody to a simple personality style. We're so much more than that. But DISC does give us a common language to have this conversation. And we talk about 4 primary personality styles or behavioral styles, D, I, S, and C. And we can certainly go into those, but each one of us is a mixture of all 4. There are 1, 2, sometimes 3 that we gravitate toward of those 4 styles. But we are a mix of all 4. And I would say most importantly, we're able to move between them. So when other assessments sort of paint a picture that we are very consistent across environments, that, if I show up and I speak with you and then I speak with somebody else, that I'm going to bring very consistent preferences and tendencies, DISC comes along and reminds us that we have some agency. We can actually choose a communication style and behavior that is going to be beneficial to us in any given moment or situation. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but we have the ability to choose our communication style. And I think when it comes to building teams and really growing as professionals ourselves, it's empowering. It really is empowering to be reminded that we can choose our behavior.
Now, I took once this personality assessment, and the highest score I got was for the dominant trait. And it's like DISC in that order. So compliance was my lowest score. Now, will there be a time when, as you grow older, perhaps, or gain more experiences, that the percentages of those personalities will also interchange? perhaps in 5 years I can be more compliant?
It's a wonderful question. People ask it quite often. I facilitate a lot of workshops for companies, teams of all sizes who want to come together to connect more effectively with one another. And that's usually one of the questions that comes up. And I think it comes up because people are used to taking assessments where their results really don't change. You could take it now and you could
Mm,
take it 5 years from now and you could get something similar. Well, as it turns out with DISC, it's actually designed to change over time. Your disc
mhm,
style or your disc preference, and we should make sure to get into those four styles. Your preference at any time is a combination of how you view yourself and how you view your environment. And so
mhm,
whenever one of those two things changes, so for example, you could receive a promotion at work. So
mhm,
or you could view yourself different because your job description has changed. Or maybe you have a day where you're not getting along so well with your supervisor. Your environment has changed, right? You don't feel like you can operate as effectively within your environment because the things are stacked against you. Whenever those things change, your disc style or preference could change. So, for
mhm,
example, and even within the same week. So, if I were to take an assessment today and everything is going well, I'm getting along with all my colleagues, I'm being recognized at work in the way that I want to, I feel like my contributions are truly appreciated. I'm going to answer all of the questions a particular way based on how I view myself and my environment. If I take it again a few days from now and things are not going well, I haven't been getting enough sleep, I'm sort of
yeah.
sort of not certain about what the future holds going into 2023, the very same questions I may choose to answer a little differently. And so my disc preferences could change as well. So
Mhm,
certainly over the 5 years you talked about, it is quite possible that at one time, you could have a stronger preference, for example, for that D or dominant style where you're very direct and decisive in your communication. And then, some things happen. Maybe you're promoted at work or you take on a different role. Um, Over time, you could view yourself a little bit differently. And maybe instead of that D or dominant style, maybe you have a stronger preference for the I or influencing style that has you focused a little bit more on people instead of on tasks.
mhm. Now I'm curious, are there any these personalities that are more inclined to become introverts or extroverts?
That's a good
Because I'm curious because I'm dominant and then I'm also an introvert. How is that possible? Are they not contradictory?
I love it. Would it be helpful to first go through the four styles and say a little bit more about what they are so that
Yes, please.
okay, let's
If you can share with our viewers.
yeah, let's do that. It'll just give your viewers a better understanding of this language that we're using. And I think it makes sense to remind people that DISC really is just it's a common language. It's a tool, it's a resource, it's an assessment, it's all of those things. But I feel like so many of us have experiences with previous companies and employers where maybe they did an assessment, but we didn't get to see the results and we weren't sure how they were going to be used. And so we got a little nervous and skeptical. When I'm sitting with teams and working with teams, I like to remind them that it's just a common language to help us have a vitally important discussion about how we do our best work and how we connect meaningfully with other people. And as soon as I set it up as a common language, I think some of that skepticism does melt away. So I wanted to be sure to make that point. DISC, as I said, is four primary styles. You have the D or dominant style, which is very focused on tasks and very actively paced. They want to get things done, people who prefer that D style, that they measure their worth and their ability to make progress and move things forward. So they're very direct and decisive with their communication. I'm very good at delegating. The I or influencing style, still very actively paced, but instead of focused on tasks, they're focused more on people and relationships, very gregarious and energetic and optimistic and sort of the cheerleader of the group. Then you move around to the S or steadiness style, still people focused like that I style is, but now with that S or steadiness style, you're pulling back on that energy a little bit. You're not as in your face. You're not as comfortable in the spotlight or on stage. You're a good listener. You really prefer to have systems in place to help you get from one point to another. Very patient. You like things to be routine or predictable so that you can guarantee success in a project, for example. And then finally, with that C, or conscientiousness style, you mentioned compliance, I think. Sometimes compliance is used as the word. Now we're back in that task focus side of things, like the D's are. Still moderately paced, so we're not terribly energetic at this point, but C's are very focused on being accurate, having things be correct. And so if I prefer that C style, I want to do things right. I don't want to make mistakes. I'm very into the details and into the minutia of a project. And I may not be terribly emotional. In the workplace, I may keep things to myself because maybe I feel like there isn't a space for emotion in the workplace. Now, to come back to your original question, which I think is a good one, DISC doesn't use the terms introversion and extroversion, things that I talk about quite regularly when I'm speaking at conferences. But the greatest correlation between DISC and Myers-Briggs, who does use those words, is that the C style is often correlated with introversion. And the I style, which is more relationship-focused, energetic, you can imagine is more correlated with the extroversion style that Myers-Briggs talks about. When you mentioned that you prefer that D or dominant style and you're also introverted, that's no surprise. I've talked to a lot of people who prefer that D or dominant style and say, you know what? I get my energy from doing work on my own at times. I'm good at delegating, so I can appreciate the relationships with other people in terms of getting more done, but if I meet you in an elevator, I may not be interested in small talk. I may keep to myself.
Yes. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for clearly explaining the different DISC personalities to our viewers. I'm sure that they appreciated that now that we have a common language.
Yeah.
Now, there are some websites that offer the quick DISC personality assessments. I wonder how accurate they are.
So as somebody who prefers that C style myself, it's music to my ears when you start questioning the accuracy of different websites. And you're right to do so. Myers-Briggs, for example, is owned by one company. Clifton Strengths is owned by one company. Gallup is Clifton Strengths. When it comes to DISC, there are countless DISC versions out there. You and I could sit in a basement tonight and come up with our own DISC assessment if we wanted to, and then we could brand that. You could probably find one on Facebook. I think Tony Robbins has one. I mean, there are any number of versions, including a number of free versions on the internet, as you've mentioned. I strongly believe that any assessment or tool that begins an important conversation about who we are and how we do our best work and connect meaningfully with others can be valuable. But to your point, if it is not valid or reliable scientifically as an assessment, as a tool, a lot of companies and individuals have a problem with that. If they're going to use an assessment for any purposes, they want to know that it's scientifically valid and reliable. It's going to measure what it says it measures, and it's going to do so consistently over time. A lot of the free websites that you would take assessments, DISC assessments on specifically out there, are neither valid nor reliable. You don't have the science behind it. You may still get, an interesting report, for example, that tells you a little bit about your preferences. But quite often they're not backed by that science. I happen to be an authorized partner for Wiley. Wiley is the world's leading publisher of DISC materials and resources, and their brand of DISC is called Everything DISC. So whenever you see the lowercase I, that is going to be Wiley. That's going to be the version that I've pretty much my entire career. I can pull a manual off of my bookshelf that's 250 pages of science behind their particular brand of DISC. Now, I'll say, Jennifer, even though I love details, I myself have not read through all 250 pages. But I like knowing when I'm working with companies and consultants that if they're curious about that, if that's important to them, that they're using an assessment that is scientifically valid and reliable, that I can show them that research and that data and put their mind at ease.
Now, my question is, how do we ensure that our dominant personality does not become a handicap? For example, that your strength is you are an influencer, but sometimes if that is your strength, that will be your go-to personality. So how do we ensure that we still become a well-rounded person? Any tips, Eric?
You're showing up with some of the best questions I've ever been asked in a
Thank you.
in an interview. This is such a good one. Gosh, it makes me think of any number of things that I can certainly come back to, but it is a good question. Because any strength that we bring to a relationship or to our work could potentially be a limitation if we're not careful. So one of the exercises that I do in the workshops when I'm with teams is I put out a bunch of adjectives, a number of words on the table or on the slide that I have, and I ask people to choose a word that they feel best describes a strength of theirs in the workplace, because the goal of our conversation is to open up and to build trust with one another and to better understand our stakeholders, the people that we're serving, and better understand ourselves. Self-awareness is such a big piece of this. And so people can choose, confident or team player or analytical. And then we talk about how those are strengths. And then very quickly, as you can imagine, I say, is it possible that that strength has ever worked against you? That it has ever been a limitation? And then certainly the person who says, well, that confidence that's a strength of mine has been perceived as arrogance by some people. That I can show up too confident in my opinion and not really consider the views of other people. Or someone who says, yeah, I value being analytical, but sometimes I can't make a decision to save my life. I have too much research to do. I have too many comparisons to make. And so my advice is always to be very aware of those strengths, almost wear them on your sleeve. Sometimes I have people write them out on a name tag and be very proud of the strengths that they bring to their work and to their relationships, because that's what makes you unique. But also be careful and be conscious and observant about when that strength might be getting in your way. So for example, if a strength of yours is analytical, do you ever get caught in that analysis paralysis?
Sometimes.
I myself, right? Yeah. Can you think of any specific examples or a hypothetical situation of when you can become too analytical?
Yeah, like belaboring a small detail. Because, for example, when I was still in the corporate, part of my job was to ensure that we manage the HR, information management systems. So if you have fat fingers, what we call them, and you put unintentionally by mistake another zero or additional two zeros, that will be a big problem. So
Right.
you really need to be,
Instead of paying somebody a weekly salary, you're paying them for the entire year with the push of a button, right?
yes.
Yeah. So, we can get into those of us who prefer that C style really can get into the details. And sometimes that analytical strength that we bring to the work that we do can really tie us up. And my own example is having moved into a new home a number of years ago, I needed chairs for my kitchen. And I went an embarrassing amount of time without chairs because I wasn't convinced I had done enough research, and I didn't want to end up with chairs that I was going to regret. And so instead of just getting something that I could sit on, that was going to serve my purposes, I didn't have chairs for quite a while. And so I think that's an example of that strength of being analytical that I do bring to my work had gotten in my way, and I wasn't observant. I wasn't careful to recognize that it was working to my disadvantage.
Right.
And I mean, I guess if I can add one more tip, sometimes it's hard to see those things ourselves because we can be blind to those limitations, or maybe we don't want to see them. If you take the assessment, you take a DiSC assessment and it gives you a 20-page report. Sometimes it's hard to read through some of the stuff that it's telling you. In those cases, I would recommend getting input from others. Somebody who you know really well, who you trust, and who perhaps loves you, wants the best for you. Go to that person. Maybe it's a supervisor or a colleague, or maybe it's even a spouse, to say, you know what, I feel like a strength of mine is that I'm a team player. That's something that I really value about myself. Have you ever seen that get in my way? Has that ever been an issue for me? Have there been instances where, without me even realizing it, the fact that I was so focused on getting consensus and making sure all voices were heard meant that we couldn't move forward. That it took a lot more time to get something done than it could have otherwise. That feedback and perception from other people can be so valuable.
Mhm. Thank you for that. Those are really insightful tips. I'm pretty sure that our viewers would appreciate them. So we'll go on a short break, Eric, and when we're back, we'll discuss another one of your passions, which is the HR hat seat.
I can't wait.
The new channel is an online new media platform of online shows for people on the go. Please watch all our shows as seen on the screen. Imagine having your own show, your own playlist, your own content. Would we make it easier for you? TNC aims to transform the lives of our viewers through engaging, authentic, and original content. Our channel is a responsible global 24/7 platform that showcases Filipino talent, global influencers, cultural intelligence, and ingenuity. Thank you for always supporting Stories from the Fringe. You can watch live or on replay via Facebook or YouTube. Follow us on IG, listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just search hashtag TNC Now. For sponsorships, please email now at anewchannel.com or send us a DM. Enjoy these life-changing shows because we made them just for you. Welcome once again, dear viewers. Before we went on the break, we were chatting with Erich Kurschat. Erich is the owner of Harmony Insights LLC, a company that helps organizations and consultants leverage the DISC personality assessment. He is also the founder of HRHotSeat, an inclusive community of HR professionals solving real HR problems. Erich draws from a broad range of experiences as a corporate HR professional, a public speaker, a career coach, a classical musician, and a proud introvert to inspire others toward meaningful work and productive workplace relationships. So let's welcome Erich again.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you for having me.
Hi, Erich. All right, so I'm curious. Can you please tell us more about the HR Hot Seat and what started it?
I'm happy to. We've already talked a little bit for the viewers who heard the first part of our conversation about the fact that you and I are both on the introverted side of things.
Yes.
And we could spend all day talking about that alone. I have an entire conference session about called Network Like an Introvert. And that's really tied to why I started HR Hot Seat. Is I had left, I had been happy in the corporate HR job that I had, and I did no networking. I thought, I have this great job and I'm happy here, and I'm not really interested in meeting people I don't know for professional reasons. And whether or not that's because I was an introvert or not, I don't know, but I think it has something to do with it. And then I left that corporate job and I started my own business, and I didn't have a network. I needed to build one, but I didn't know where to begin. And so I, found some local HR organizations and different business associations. And Jennifer, what I was finding was that a lot of it felt very superficial and transactional. That I was showing up and we were exchanging business cards. Maybe I would have a nice conversation, but I would get home with those business cards and I didn't know what to do with them. And honestly, I didn't really care to do much with them because I hadn't really gotten to know anybody. I didn't feel like I had made a meaningful connection. And as an introvert, there's this misconception that we don't want to socialize, that we don't get energy from connecting with other people. And that's not true. We certainly get energy from other people. We just have to be careful about how many other people and in what context, But I certainly like a conversation like this. I look forward to because I really do enjoy it. But I hadn't felt like I was connecting meaningfully with others. A couple of words that were in your introduction, the video introduction that you had to our conversation that I made note of were inclusive and transformational. I love those words because they're a through line for much of the work that I do. I had heard that networking could be inclusive and that it could be transformational, but I was not experiencing these things myself. And at the same time, I really didn't want to get far from the HR background that I had. I wanted to stay close to HR professionals. So I thought, how can I address this issue? And so I decided to create the community that I wanted to be a part of, where I could bring HR professionals together and we could connect meaningfully with one another. You weren't showing up and shaking hands and then having some sort of, transactional conversation, but instead it was very meaningful. You got to know people and you became friends even and wanted to see them again and serve them and support them in whatever ways that you could. So I talked to some friends, I started what I called the Chicago HR Mastermind. It's now called HR Hot Seat. And my goal was just to bring 8 to 10 or 12 HR professionals together on a regular basis for this mastermind style conversation, which is solving common problems, showing up and building trust and accountability. So I talked to some friends and I think I had about 6 people at my first meetup, and I was really excited about that. I thought this would be great. And then at the next one, I think I had 9. And in the third one, I had 14. And it wasn't growing exponentially, but Jennifer, I was starting to get nervous.
Why, if I may ask?
Because more people were showing up than I had planned for. I thought this is going to be a nice intimate group. And of course, part of that was by design. I was allowing more people to show up. Well, without boring you with the details, pretty soon I had people coming to me from other cities saying, I hear what you're doing. in Chicago, I would like to do something similar in my market. And then I thought, oh my goodness, this has gotten so much larger than I had ever anticipated. Now, 6 years later, over 6 years later, we have thousands of members in 14 different licensed chapters around the country.
Wow. Wow. That's wonderful.
We've had up to 130 people at the in the Chicago chapter events that I continue to organize and facilitate, and they've been held in some amazing places, hosted by United Airlines and LinkedIn and Career Builder and some of the local universities here in town, and we're seeing similar success around the country. And most days I feel like I'm trying to keep up with it.
Yeah, actually, that's my question. How do you manage all these 14 chapters?
Luckily, I partner with some really great people, typically, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, or people who work for larger organizations that serve HR professionals that say, you know what, networking in my market is kind of stale or non-existent. I want to bring HR professionals together in a way that's fresh and meaningful and exciting in some of these things that I don't think exist here. And so with the licensing model that I have in place, I partner with great people who end up facilitating a new chapter in their neck of the woods, and it's worked really well so far. The pandemic was a little bit of a challenge, as you can imagine, but I'm really excited about our potential going forward to really grow the 14 chapters and take on additional chapters too, wherever people crave meaningful HR networking.
Okay, so you moved to the digital space, but right now is the US already relaxing the restrictions, and you have now gotten back to face-to-face meetings?
Yeah, that is what we're finding. And so, we started as a face-to-face networking, organization. And like I mentioned, I had up to about 130 people, and we still break out into smaller problem-solving groups to maintain that intimacy that traditional masterminds are known for. But it was face-to-face until the pandemic hit the United States. And then so for at last count, it was 33 or so months. We've been virtual and we've been on Zoom. And as you can imagine, over that time, our numbers grew a little bit smaller as people just wanted to spend less time, I think, on Zoom and online in front of their computers. But we still had a great group, continue to have a great group of people that show up. Well, now that things are relaxing a bit in terms of those restrictions, some of the things that you mentioned, I think people are becoming a little bit more comfortable and really craving that in-person interaction again. As of December, at least the chapter that I run, which is our Chicago chapter that I started with, we will be back together in person for our holiday social here at the House of Blues in Chicago, which we're excited about. Then going forward into 2023, which I know is coming up very soon, I have to really make an important decision about the extent to which we go virtual or go back to in person or remain virtual. So I'm still figuring some of that out now. But yes, as the restrictions are lessened or relaxed here in the United States, I think we're seeing a shift back to some of that in-person networking that we enjoyed so much beforehand.
Yeah. Right. Without dropping any names of individuals or organizations, would it be all right if you can share some of the usual HR problems that the HRHotSeat members usually bring when you meet together?
Of course.
I'm asking because perhaps there are some HR practitioners also listening to us right now, and they can relate to that and say, okay, I can learn from that.
Yes, wonderful. I mean, that's a great question. And honestly, the reason why we come together, it's everything we do. First of all, it's entirely free. Our entire community, everything that you would do with us would be free. And that includes, in some chapters, a book club. It includes SHRM and HRCI credits, recertification credits, and far more. So we have a lot of fun. But yeah, we're bringing people together to tackle common challenges, and our conversations are driven by our members. So instead of me picking a theme or just sort of a challenge out of a hat that I think is timely, our members show up and they say, I need feedback. I need advice from my peers. I need to learn from people who have been in my shoes. And if you haven't, your perspective is still very valuable. You might be a student, you might be in job transition, You might be a service provider. Regardless of your background, your experience and perspective, it ends up being very helpful and valuable. So some example challenges that our members have brought, a really common one is actually related to the job search. You know, I have a career or a history of doing HR type work, but I haven't had any official HR titles, and now I'm trying to transition into the HR field. How should I do that? How can I position myself as an attractive candidate for meaningful HR work without having had official HR titles in the past? We have people who show up and say, I'm launching my first diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative in my organization. I've never done that before. You know, if you've done that, what are some best practices that you can share with me to help me be more successful? You have some folks that say, you know, I'm trying to influence our company leadership to give HR a more strategic voice in our company. You know, I know there's so much more that we can do, you know, that I'm able to do for the organization, but our leadership isn't yet to the point where they see HR as a strategic partner in the business. You know, how can I influence that conversation? So our challenges range from very personal, sort of individual, professional development type questions to larger scale, organization-wide team dynamics, you know, change management questions that really benefit from the input and perspective of people's peers.
So you've mentioned that they are also tackling or trying to tackle large organizational challenges. Now, with the advent of robotics and AI, how are the HR personnel taking into this? Are they warming up into it, or are they like other people? They are afraid that they will be replaced by robots and or AI.
I don't know if there's a single person out there that isn't concerned about losing their job to technology at some point, right? And I don't think HR folks are immune to that. I think for a lot of us, and I'm not speaking specifically for HR, but I think for a lot of us, AI is exciting. You know, that it's going to be so beneficial and is already very beneficial to so many organizations, and certainly within the HR space. When you talk about candidates submitting applications, you know, the fact that you don't have to have people sorting through those applications, but instead systems can, you know, to really identify some qualified candidates for a role. I think people would argue that that is certainly a benefit. Is it also a limitation? Probably. We talked earlier about any strength can be a limitation, right? Now, suddenly it's not a person who is going through those applications. It's a machine, it's a robot, or it's technology. And so you lose that connection. So I think that HR is probably just as excited as anybody else about the potential for AI and technology to help us do our work even more effectively, even better. But I think we have to remain very cognizant of the value of human interaction, of that connection that only happens between two people. If I run an organization and you're applying as a candidate, what sort of message does it send if the first couple of stages of your interview are entirely with technology, you know, instead of with a person that you can connect with meaningfully? If I want you to have the best possible application experience and give you a sense of who we are as an organization and what we value as a culture, I'm probably going to want to use technology very, I almost said sparingly. I don't mean sparingly, but intentionally. You know, to what extent can technology be beneficial to me and to our organization and to our interaction? And in what ways can I remain mindful of the potential for it to also be a drawback in some instances?
Thank you for that. Now, we've tackled a lot, and we're close to the bottom of the hour. Now, if there are any three things that you would like our audience to take away from this conversation, what are those?
Oh my gosh, 3 things. All right, this is off the top of my head, so let me think about this for a moment. Number 1, I often recommend people, to consider the platinum rule. The golden rule says, "Treat others the way that you would wanna be treated," and there's a good
Mhm.
place for that. We understand the value of that. Someone along the way coined the platinum rule, which says, "Treat others the way that they would like to be treated." So when we talk about DISC, whether you use DISC or another assessment as a common language, the moment we start considering that different people need different things from us, and the moment we start treating them the way they want to be treated, as opposed to the way that we do, we start to connect more meaningfully with others. I think being intentional, bringing a certain intention to your communication. So not just treating others the way they want to be treated, but consider the language that you're using. Consider your style of communication, how you are serving the people that you serve, whomever your stakeholders happen to be. I think the moment we get intentional about that service, that connection really does become more meaningful. And then finally,
Mhm.
because I just used the word connection, you know,
Mhm.
have a LinkedIn presence, connect with other people, whether you are introverted, extroverted, or somewhere in between. When you invite people to connect on LinkedIn, value a meaningful connection. Don't have it end with hitting the connect button. You may be um, connected in terms of technology, but to truly form a meaningful connection with somebody else, it takes a little bit more effort. So be intentional about that connection, but really do connect. Make it a point to build your network, grow your network one person at a time, and get to know those people instead of seeing them as numbers. And I can't help but think that you will thrive in your career, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah. To your point, make sure that your LinkedIn connections are not just numbers. I have some connections. I don't know and I don't understand. Like they would send me a LinkedIn connection, and when I accept, and I always tell them, "Hi, I'm glad to have connected here on LinkedIn, and I want to know my connections over a 30-minute Zoom coffee." And here's my scheduling tool. You can choose whatever is your preferred date and time, so we can make brief introductions and we can explore possible synergies for what we do. And then I would hear crickets, and to my mind, what is this? Why would you send me a LinkedIn connection if you don't want to grow deeper? Or are you just trying to increase the number of your LinkedIn connections so it will be impressive? I don't know how it will affect their LinkedIn rankings if they have like 10,000 or 14,000 connections. And in my opinion, again, as an introvert, I have only too much time and energy to spend on building meaningful connections. So how can someone with 10,000 or 14,000 LinkedIn connections get to know each of these personally?
Right. You know what? I mean, everybody connects in different ways and for different reasons. And for a lot of people, you are going to be a number. I remember accepting a request once, and the person's banner when I went to their profile page said 18,000 in big numbers. And I
That's
I knew that
crazy.
I knew that I was just a number at that point. And I got no response from this person. Even before accepting an invitation for a meeting, I would be happy if people would simply just personalize their invitation. I one of my greatest pieces of advice, or more passionate pieces of advice, is that you personalize every single LinkedIn invitation that you send. It can be done both on a desktop and on your phone. The phone, has you, or a device has you go through an extra step or two. But every single time you invite someone to connect, if you simply personalize it with something meaningful, your chances of building a meaningful relationship, getting a response, getting a conversation or an interview, they go up significantly. And so few people do that if even a fraction of your audience, your viewers today, begins personalizing their LinkedIn invitations, they will stand out in ways that are going to be so beneficial to them.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good tip. I'm pretty sure that when you do that, your your LinkedIn connection request will be accepted by the other party. And then conversely, when I said that the LinkedIn connections, they're requesting for a LinkedIn connection, so I hear crickets. And the other way around is after you have approve their LinkedIn connection request, the second you did that is they would send you like a sales page. They're already trying to sell you something and not even asking, what do you need? How can I serve you?
Yeah, I can't tell you, Jennifer, how many recently I feel like this is a trend where people are sending me messages and then their follow-up sales pitch is, we are helping people. We're excited to help you build your own business, to start your first business. And then sometimes it's, we have a franchise opportunity or licensing opportunity for you. Well, if they looked at my LinkedIn page, they would see, number one, I already have my own business. And two, I'm already licensing HRHotSeat. So the very things that they want me to do or to help me with, I'm already doing. And so that doesn't mean
Yeah.
that the conversation couldn't be valuable, but do at least a little bit of research before you personalize.
Yes.
I had to give them credit for personalizing a message, sending me a message at all. But geez, if it was a little bit more personalized to what my actual needs and challenges were, I might have
Mhm.
far more conversations with some of these people.
Yeah. Yeah. Build relationships, right? Come from a place of service, how you can best serve the other person, not just take and take. That's how you build your network, not just network, but build your network. This has been a wonderful conversation, Eric, and I learned a lot from you. Thank you so much. Now, how can our viewers get in touch with you? How can they follow you on social media and get to know more about your work?
Well, we've already talked about LinkedIn, so that's usually where I send people first. I spend probably far too much time on LinkedIn, so I would love if people found me there, requested to connect, and then personalized their invitation. How about that?
Yes,
Of
that's a
course,
tip.
of course, all things DiSC for the DiSC personality assessment is at harmonyinsights.com. That's my primary company. And then for any aspiring or seasoned HR professionals who really want to begin connecting more meaningfully with their colleagues and their peers, entirely for free. HRHotSeat.com is an opportunity to create a free profile, even if there isn't a local chapter in your market. Just creating a profile there allows you to connect with thousands of people around the world. And I would love to hear from you and support you in whatever way I can support you.
Wonderful. And we look forward to hearing more about your work.
Thank you,
Thank
Jennifer. I really
you.
appreciate this opportunity to talk with you.
The pleasure is mine. Dear viewers, thank you once again for spending your Thursday morning with us. I'll see you again next Thursday, December 29th, 10:30 a.m. Philippine Standard Time. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, depending where you are in the world. God bless everyone.